Great.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to True Disabled Story. My name is Nico, and I use he, him pronouns. I'm a white man with blonde hair, large blue and brown spectacles, and a light purple button up dress shirt. I'm seated in front of an office wall, like roughly 25% of Americans and 17% of Philadelphians. I am disabled. And whether we look locally, nationally, or even globally, disability communities are full of dynamic, diverse, and frankly, delightful people with their own stories to tell. All we have to do is listen to them. Now, folks, I was born with my disability, and I'll probably always be disabled, never known differently. So I'm very naturally interested in the diagnosis stories of other disabled friends. And I'm honored to be joined today by Emma. Emma, how are you doing today? Thank you for joining in.
Hi, I'm doing well, and thank you so much for having me.
Oh,
I can start, I'll give a my pronouns are she, her, and I'll give a visual description as well. I'm a white cisgender woman in my early 30s. I'm physically disabled and seated in my motorized wheelchair. And I have long wavy brown hair, and I'm wearing a seafoam green dress and earrings that are in the shape of roses.
fantastic. Thank you. Emma, what was your path to diagnosis like? Was this something that was a surprise, or were you actively pursuing it? Paint that picture for me.
So I have three diagnoses. I have muscular dystrophy, ADHD, and dyscalculia. Um, and the muscular dystrophy was that was diagnosed when I was 4 years old. That got diagnosed pretty quickly. My mom, who was a nurse, knew that I had something pretty much the moment I was placed into her arms, and so she took care of that sort of journey for me, and actively pursued a diagnosis. And I got it through a muscle biopsy. And like I said, I was 4 years old, so I was pretty young. But I do remember it. I, you know, it was a pretty it wasn't a traumatic experience. It was I feel like I always kind of had an understanding of my body, and that it was disabled in that way, and that I have muscular dystrophy. Even if I didn't have the vocabulary for it, I just sort of knew. And so getting a diagnosis was pretty chill, actually. It really wasn't. um I don't remember that time being, I went to a few doctor's appointments. I had to get a little surgery, um, but it was pretty, yeah, it was pretty chill. I think, but the ADHD and dyscalculia that came later, those were, um, a lot more significant, I feel like. So with the dyscalculia, I had always had difficulty with math. I felt like, no matter how hard I studied or how many tutors I worked with, my brain just sort of went, nope. And that was really frustrating. Um, my mom took me to get neuropsych testing done when I was in my early teens, and that's when I was formally diagnosed. But I was actually just told that it was like a math disability. I didn't have Nobody told me that there was a formal name. And so for a long time, that's all I knew, that I had this math disability, but I had no other details. I was really embarrassed to talk about it, and I didn't want to acknowledge it unless I had to. Um, and then, with ADHD, that came from really just doing some research and being more connected within the disability community and recognizing that these things that I thought were, either behavioral issues or, I also thought, because my dad, who also has ADHD, demonstrates a lot of the same behaviors. And I thought, like, oh, is this like a Farley thing? Is this like I thought it was something like me and my dad, like, did, or But as I was connected with the disability community and started to do some research and really being active in the advocacy work, I started to recognize that, oh, this is probably ADHD or some sort of neurodivergence. Um, I got connected with a doctor locally through a coworker, and the diagnosis was pretty quick. I think in that first initial appointment, that doctor was like, yeah, you have ADHD. um, but again, there wasn't really any education or anything like that. It was, I just got all these diagnoses I just kind of got, and it really took my own research or my own like wanting to understand is when I found those answers, when I really started to, you know, identify with these different disabilities. Muscular dystrophy is a little bit different because I kind of like to say it's the star of the show a lot. And so it takes up a lot of attention. And so I guess with that one, maybe the information kind of came to me because it's something that I couldn't really ignore, because it did impact me a little bit more obviously on a day-to-day basis. So yeah.
Emma, thank you. The thing that I find most poignant about that story is, as you mentioned, when you were diagnosed with ADHD, that only came to you as being like a math problem, when in reality it's far more than that. By
Mhm.
comparison, your muscular dystrophy, you got the information right away, and it sounds you got a fairly comprehensive set of information as well.
Well, I mean, well, sort of actually, I didn't even really. So muscular dystrophy actually, so when I was diagnosed at age 4, they were calling it congenital muscular dystrophy, which is a fancy way of saying like we know that it was present at birth, but we don't know. There's muscular dystrophy is an umbrella term. There's lots of different types. They didn't really, I didn't fit within the types that were known at that time when I was born or when I was 4. And so they were calling it congenital. I had a second muscle biopsy when I was like 12, and then they were calling it limb girdle, but there's a couple different types of limb girdle. So, it didn't really fit within those either. I had genetic testing done at like 21. And I got a formal, like the actual diagnosis of I have a collagen VI related myopathy, which is super rare. Like I think there was only 2 other people with that specific diagnosis that they had on record. Um, so there was a little bit of a journey with that, but at the end of the day, it was muscular dystrophy. So it didn't really make a difference. And that really wasn't a priority for me to like, I didn't, I knew it was MD. I know there's, it was just sort of, I wanted it for my records, kind of just to make sure everything was accurate.
Absolutely. Thank you for persevering in that diagnosis for yourself.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know, kind of away from perhaps a diagnostic or even medical setting, what impact have these diagnoses had on your life? Like, how have they impacted how you show up socially or other ways, maybe academically, if you want to talk about that? Uh, tell me more about this.
Yeah. So, well, with any identity, um, that affects how you see the world, how you interact with the world, how you see yourself, how you behave. It affects lots of, your really how you are shaped and how your life is shaped. Um, and so it affects, my disabilities affect everything. They affect um how I see myself, the view that I have on the of the world. They affect how I interact with others, how I interact with my environment. So it's like yeah, it's a part of my everyday, it impacts every part of my life. I think um throughout my life, it's really just been a journey. So I think with any well, whether you're formally diagnosed or not, a disability, um, it takes time to understand it, to understand what that means for you or what you want it to mean for you. And so it's been really, yeah, it's been a journey. It's impacted me. Sometimes in my life, I felt like it had a negative impact. Other times I feel like it's the greatest gift. Um, it really just it's been lots of different it's showed up in lots of different ways for me, but I think that just kind of comes with growing up and developing and figuring out who you are and what you want to do with your life and what you believe in. So, but yeah, but I guess specifically, I mean, so muscular dystrophy impacts me physically. But I found that it's, because this is my normal. Me having muscular dystrophy is as normal and natural as me having blue eyes and brown hair. It's all I've ever known. And so it it feels that way. I think really it's the emotional side of it that feels like it had the most impact. It's again really developing, how I want to how I want to view this disability, how I want it to um the way I want to interact with it, the way I want to interact with the world. And that was really tough, because I was the only kid in school who had, I've never met anybody who is like me. I actually, having such a rare type, it felt kind of lonely sometimes. Um, but I don't know. Yeah, it's meant different things at different times, but as of now, the impact I feel I look back and I feel really grateful. With ADHD and dyscalculia, it's impacted, I didn't really have any information about it till I reached adulthood, even though I got the diagnosis as a teenager. I didn't want to interact with it. I didn't want it to be true. So I, just sort of shut it out. Even though it, showed up anyway. I guess that has impacted me more in, yeah, emotionally. It's been a little bit of a journey to have the confidence to be able to accept that for myself and to be able to see it as a normal way of being and not something that's wrong with me or something that I need to fix. Gaining a sense of humor about it has been helpful. Um, and with ADHD, the more that I learn about, I mean, for a long time before my diagnosis, I thought it was behavior problems. I thought, maybe it was like something just me and my dad had. Um, when I finally when I finally got that diagnosis and when I started to interact with other people who have ADHD, I felt so relieved. I felt like this, I felt like everything kind of clicked. There were a lot of sort of, ways in which I was blaming myself or I was very confused about like why I couldn't, you know, do things the way other people were doing them or interact with the world in that way. And I felt like I just felt very relieved. And I also felt like I understood a lot of things about my life that were very frustrating, very confusing. Um, so yeah, I guess to tie it all together, it's not the way it's impacted my life hasn't always been positive. It's not always the way I felt, but overall, I feel like, it's been positive. It's just been a journey overall.
Thanks for taking us along on that journey with you. It really sounds comprehensive is the word I was looking for. I really appreciate it. So this is your journey. You've lived it, and it's taken your entire life. Here you are in the early stages of being in your 30s. Now, if you could go back and maybe revisit your younger self somehow, or maybe mentor a kid who is just starting their MD or ADHD journey, what advice would you give?
I think the advice I would give is it's really important to establish a connection with the disability community, particularly those who are disability justice activists. I think that, to develop relationships, ask questions, have discussions, seek support. A lot of what we need as disabled people can be obtained by going through the disability community. Um, all the answers I was ever looking for, all of the issues or obstacles I faced, um, really the times where they were resolved or where I came to some sort of conclusion, or resolution, it was when I went through the disability community. I mean, it's such a powerful, um, the disability community and how we support each other, how we um, show up. It has such a positive impact. That's where I learned the history of disability. It's where everything important that I've learned or developed with my disability identity has come from the connections I've made from within the community.
That's wise advice indeed. Thank you so much. Emma, as we close our time together, I want to give you a chance that I give everybody I talk to on projects like these, regardless of the exact topic. This is your chance, Emma, to give yourself a shout out, to promote yourself, to share any recent wins you have going on, or to talk about what's next for you. Where can people find you online? Emma, this is like your chance to step up on your soapbox and to like be your own cheerleader. So let's have it.
Yeah, well, I'll start with where people can find me. I'm on LinkedIn. I can also be found on Instagram, although I'm not as active on Instagram, but I'm there. Um, yeah, I have a website that is under construction. It'll be finished soon, but when it is done, you can go to www.itsemmafarley.com. Just plain Emma Farley was taken. So, um, but yeah, so those are where I'm active, where you can find me, where you can contact me. Um, let's see. I guess what's next for me is I'm really um my focus is just gaining more experience and being active within the disability community. That's really what I've always been the most passionate about. I think I've always felt like I'm supposed to be involved in helping the community progress or make things better. So yeah, and I guess I'm so just trying to find opportunities. I'm really excited for one that's coming up next week. I'm participating in a panel discussion on disability and employment law. That's very exciting for me. That's a topic I'm particularly passionate about. Um, and it's a win for me, definitely, because this is the first time I'm being like, I've done a lot of work in the disability community. This is not my first panel discussion, not my first public speaking gig, but it's the first time I'm being paid for it. And that's a really big accomplishment. What I don't think people realize is a lot of the activism work and the advocacy work goes unpaid. It's really comes from people's passion. And so it's a big milestone when people say, hey, you've worked hard. Here's a little bit of compensation. It's never been about the money for me, but it does help because there's a lot of work to be done. So, it's time and effort, and it's nice to be rewarded, even though it already is rewarding, but we all gotta eat.
Emma, congratulations on reaching that milestone. I'm looking forward to that discussion. Thank you so much. I'm
Of
rooting for you,
course.
friend.
And yeah, is there any more questions for me? Is that it?
That's it. You've done wonderfully. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.